What's up guys, hello to Footballtalk here. It's that time of the year when Divisional draft and roster review series kicks off, where over the next 4 weeks we'll alternate between NFC and AFC, going around the clock from north to east, south and then west, putting the spotlight on all 32 franchises and what they've done this offseason with a heavy focus on the NFL draft. So this will be more of a podcast version where I start by reading off all the players each team selected, give a quick scouting report on them and how they fit within the roster, what I anticipate the role to be, then share my overarching thoughts on each class and what they mean within the context of what those teams had already done in the offseason. And at the end of each video, although I'm not a big fan of draft grades necessarily, I'll stack those 4 teams up against each other in terms of how much I liked how they approached the draft and collection of talent they brought in. Just for context, I watched over 370 prospects this year. There were a handful of guys who got selected that I didn't get to, some of them I might have checked out since, but there'll be like 2 to 3 names per video typically that I'll be brief on, since they'll be fighting to even make those rosters anyway. I want to get right into this thing, but just real quick, if you enjoyed the analysis, please hit the like button for me and feel free to subscribe. We're here all off season without any silly shenanigans, just real talk about ball. The link to my site hellotofootballtalk.com for all my content, and timestamps for the 4 teams are down below in the description. So let's start off with the Chicago Bears, who in the first round 10th overall selected Colston Loveland, a tight end out of Michigan, then 3 second rounders for a 9th overall Luther Burden III, wide receiver Missouri, 56th Ozzy Trapilo, offensive tackle Boston College, and 62nd overall Shamar Turner, interior defensive lineman out of Texas A&M. Then in the 4th round, 132nd overall, Ruben Hippolyte II, linebacker Maryland, 5th round, 169th overall Saf Frazier, cornerback out of UTSA. In the 6th round, 195th overall Luke Newman, interior offensive lineman Michigan State, and then in the 7th round, 233rd overall Kyle Monangai, running back out of Rutgers. We thought the Bears would either go edge or running back if Boise State's Ashton Jeanty was available at the end of the top 10, but instead they went heavy on pass catcher early on, first with Loveland, very talented fluid receiving option, but basically the prototype Y size at 6'6", just under 250 pounds, and gives you more in the run game than people give him credit for throughout the draft process. Fundamentally sound with his initial footwork, how he latches his hands as a blocker, light feet to glide up to the second level, and an effective stock block on the perimeter. Quick to clear the second level up the seam, very little wasted movement in his breaks, subtle with his head fakes and drifting his stems in order to set up defenders one-on-one. He tracks the ball naturally and aligns his hands properly, showing easy adjustments when the placement is slightly off, and he's pretty elusive after the catch, pulling his legs away from contact, and using his off arm to fend off tacklers. Loveland has definitely gotten strong as a blocker, but too often would still try to brace against powerful edge defenders instead of being the initiator of contact. And he only hauled in 2 of 10 contested catch opportunities last season, where he has some room to become more physical at boxing out his opponents. But right around the range where I valued him, and even though the Bears already had Cole Kmet in the building on a solid deal, I think Loveland offers a different dimension as a movable piece, and I really like what we could see from the 12 personnel packages, until he maybe gets to the point where they're comfortable with the rookie having his hand in the dirt more excessively, with 3 wide receivers on the field around him. Next up with Burden, super explosive weapon, who I ranked as my number 2 wide receiver behind only Arizona's Tad McMillan, who went 8th overall to Carolina. For Burden, on slot fades, he'll incorporate a little jab inside before taking off and get on top of his man, and he has that extra gear to detach from the trailing defender on rail and wheel routes, or when a deep ball's in the air and he can run under it. Consistently plucks the ball off his frame and puts it away instantaneously in order to not have it jarred loose, and I think he plays way bigger than his size would indicate in contested situations with some hard real period catches. Has that zigzag running style with the ball in his hands, which makes it really tough to corral him for the defense, and his acceleration is impressive, but it's how abruptly he can come to a stop that's truly special, and his low center of gravity leads to him slipping out of plenty of tackles. Burden was given a ton of free access and hasn't shown a release package that will allow him to consistently get off press at the throw level, and he's not urgent and or purposeful to take care of his blocking assignments near the point of attack, where safeties down low if close to the formation are simply a mismatch for him. I think this guy has some special talent, and it was overthought throughout the draft process. He has things to work on, especially if he has to play more extensively outside, but he's probably going to get a lot of design touches early on to let those yards of the catch skills shine, and while that room looks a little crowded right now on paper, he can eventually be a DJ Moore plus, especially with how disengaged the guy felt at the end of last year, which was also what people criticized about Burden in 2024 with the disrupted Mizzou offense. Then Trapilo is the 6'8", 350-pound tackle with a dense, strong frame, starting the last 3 years for the Eagles, first on the left and then the right end of the line for the latter 2. Features a purposeful first step in the run game and consistently able to create torque and move edge defenders to the outside hip so the offense can hit runs inside of him. Patient pass protector who typically doesn't overextend and keeps his feet underneath himself, showing the ability to keep defenders at the end of his reach and reconnect at the top of the rush if he loses touch momentarily. And he keeps his eyes busy if unoccupied in the early phase of dropbacks, where you rarely ever see someone slip through the V-gap on his watch while having a strong base to absorb force. His naturally high pad level and the lack of flexibility to attach on the distress plates or ribs of defenders limit his ability to create initial movement in the run game, while I don't see the short area agility to consistently be trusted with backside cutoffs. While in pass pro, he commits his shoulders early and lifts his inside foot off the ground against speed of the edge, making himself vulnerable to be crossed up. I think the starting experience in both tackle spots was the key here. I don't look at Trapilo as the high upside option to eventually protect Caleb Williams' blindside for a decade, but that's kind of what they drafted Kieran Amagaji on day 3 for last year to potentially develop into, and Trapilo gives them the insurance if one of the starters gets hurt right now, that he won't be overwhelmed if you need to throw him in there, since he didn't have another true tackle on the roster. Shamar Turner, the Texas A&M interior D lineman, kind of a tweener with his size at 6'3", around 290 pounds, who basically lined up everywhere for the Aggies until focusing more on between the tackles work in 2024. Frequently was able to crash across the face of blockers in the run game, and when lined up head over offensive tackles, uses some impressive moments of mirroring zone steps, can add a little shake and then go through pass protectors with the bull rush after getting them to stop the feet. And in both the run and pass game, his ability to yank cloth and discard blockers after extending those 33.5-inch arms allows him to gain the upper hand. Turner loses track of the ball occasionally with his head buried into the frame of offensive linemen, and tries to go underneath blocks when he should be working over top, in order to stay involved in the play or just hold his ground, and his hands lack a certain violence, where he can get pretty wild trying to pull off different swipes, and flashy but ineffective spin moves. So that, along with his missed tackle rate steadily increasing over the last 4 years with the Aggies, gives him some pause here. I thought this was pretty early for Turner, where it was generally lower on the consensus, but for Tennessee's Omar Lot to go one pick later makes it an even tougher look. I'm interested in how exactly they use him, because back in 2023, he lined up a lot more as a 6 technique, and I could see him play on the edge on some early downs before sliding inside in passing situations. Since last year's 5th rounder Austin Booker is still coming along, Dominic Robinson is more of a pure designated pass rusher, and they brought in a similar profile in free agent Dayo Odeingbo. I could see Turner basically be his direct backup. Then Ruben Hippolytes II, the name that haunted me throughout day 3, because as I pointed out in the opening, I evaluated over 370 prospects for this draft class and pride myself on making it to at least round 6 before a player's name is called who I didn't get to, and I had never even heard of this dude. Just under 6 feet, 235 pounds, ran 4.42 at his pro day, and went under 7 seconds on the free cone drill. As I said in my big draft recap, in Dane Brugler's The Beast, there were 34 linebackers with a write-up, including 10 with a priority for agent grade. Hippolyte was the first name off the list entirely. Call it out of spite, but I didn't take the time to go back and watch him, even though really it's more about the timing of this being my first video of the series. But this guy was about 100 spots outside the draftable range according to consensus boards, and it's not like we didn't have enough tape on him. He started 46 career games. So either everyone's wrong here, and I'm rooting for all these guys, but most likely they'll look at him as a core special teamer with a great size speed profile. But then in the 5th round, Star Frazier, super long, freaky corner coming out of the same school as Rick Woolen 3 years ago, 6 picks and 9 more PBUs last season, then ran a 4.36 at the combine at 6'3" with 33-inch arms, bullied quite a few of those smaller receivers that he faced in the AAC before they could even get out of the stands, with how he can sit back and jam them backwards, and even if he does lose face momentarily, he still has the wheels to catch back up to the route. Shockingly explosive when he can read the quarterback with flat-foot alignments and break on hitches or slants. When he locks out those arms, receivers just aren't going to get to him and gain control as blockers, and he has a large tackling radius, only missing 2 of 30 on attempts last season. He already turns 25 in October and didn't even log 100 defensive snaps combined in the first 2 or 3 seasons at UTSA, where you see him get caught up in traffic on stuff like mesh at times, and his insanely long legs can lead to some pretty segmented movements, which means you're not going to ask this guy to play off-man coverage at any extensive rate. So definitely more of a project, but I bet I'd be willing to make it at the end of the 5th round. Former Giant League McLeod and 5th round Terrell Smith from a couple of years ago, who has performed very well when called upon, and the only 2 corners of note on that roster along the starting 3, so I like this investment here. Luke Newman, one of the names I highlighted as part of a deep interior line class, 4 years at Holy Cross before joining Michigan State this past season, started every single game he was available for at left tackle first, and then left guard for Sparty after the initial redshirt. Snappy out of his stance to get to his landmarks as a run blocker, regularly taking away the neutral zone and then calls his hips into contact, while keeping his hands and feet connected. Has those quick hyperactive feet and consistently carries his hands at his midsection, being able to stun rushers, keep his feet underneath himself and operate with great sync in his pace. but only his 31-inch arms and pretty small hands to give him minimal room for error and lead to him sliding off contact late, and too often presents a soft outside shoulder and ends up leading to rushes up the arc, while occasionally ducking his head into contact, trying to take steam off those guys. And at the end, Kyle Monanga from Rutgers, rugged back who was the heart of that Scarlet Knight offense with his hard-nosed running style and his commitment to killing linebackers and pass protection, 5'9", 210-pound bowling ball with that slow-to-it, blow-through-it style of rhythmic but sudden running, brings a violence and determination that is second to none, chugging through or swiping aside tackling attempts, and you also see that in pass pro, bringing the fight to blitzes early and dishing out some devastating rip shots, just really lacks some juice through the line of scrimmage and then any kind of pull-away gear, and basically was a non-factor as a receiver, other than a few swings and hook routes. I still don't love DeAndre Swift as a starter, but he did show improvements down the stretch last year. Roshan Johnson is a solid all-rounder behind him, but then it'll be Monanga batting Travis Homer for that RB3 spot, third down guy who they can rely upon in protection, and I could see him being a fan favorite. So altogether I think Chicago did a so-so job here, not exactly what I expected them to do, but with Loveland and Burden are added, that offense is loaded with skill position talent, after how much they focused on fixing the O-line in front of the second-year quarterback. Trapilio and Newman, I believe, give them a solid floor depth for that unit. Frazier like a lot as a high upside corner, who I think could have gone a round and a half earlier. Not a big fan at all of Turner at the end of the second, with Waters available on the board, and then letting the teams around him dictate that they needed to jump on his position group run. He pulled out as the shocker, way early objectively, with my personal opinion taken in, probably the primary special teamer. Monanga late is really solid and could hang around for a while as the RB3. Overall, I didn't think they got great value outside of Burden early in the second, with a couple of selections that really made me scratch my head, but I think they've accomplished the most important thing, which was make Caleb Williams feel comfortable, down to Ben Johnson as the offense in command, and I believe the defense is due for a rebound, so all in all I see the Bears looking a lot more like what they were projected to be last year. Up next, the reigning division champs and NFC's number 1 seed, who unfortunately took an early playoff exit in the Detroit Lions, who went round 1 20th overall Tyreek Williams, interior defensive lineman Ohio State, second round 57th overall Tate Radledge, interior offensive lineman Georgia, third round 70th overall Isaac Tesla, wide receiver Arkansas, 5th round 171st overall Miles Frazier, interior offensive lineman LSU, 6th round 196th overall Ahmed Hassanein, edge defender out of Boise State, and then 2 7th rounders out of Georgia, 230th overall Dan Jackson the safety, and 244th overall Dominic Lovett the wide receiver. For Tyreek at the top, the 6'3", 330-pound rock in the middle of the Ohio State defense, and what I compared him to in my scouting report, he's kind of that kid that kept getting bigger and bigger, but didn't really change the way he moves. You're just not going to move this man off his spots on one-on-one blocks in the run game, with quick skilled hands to pull guys off himself as they get the weight too far out in front and the ball carrier approaches, keeps his feet and hands moving to work over the top of the blocking, and so damn strong reaching out with one arm and little brothering running backs as they try to get past him as he's engaged with a lineman. For a man his size, the ability to sink his arms and hips as he's pulling off hand combats and steps around guards really pops. Great as a looper, and quick to get his paws up to bet down passes at the line. Williams could certainly do a better job of playing with extension in the run game and a suboptimal length for 432-inch arms, and he needs to improve his ability on all our pass protectors to land that initial stab into his chest, and I think over on dropback situations, he lacks a certain urgency and quick touch through his movements. So for a first round pick to primarily be a 2-down player potentially is somewhat questionable, but I do think he's a very Lionsy player, which is a reference to Mark Sessler having a little banter on Heat the Call with Lance Zierlein, who writes all the player profiles for NFL.com. I'm wondering how early they think Lee McNeil is back to 100%, since they still have DJ Reader as that Chase knows. Tyreek probably can play there or at the free technique, and he has some room to allow his pass rush to come along, because they really need to keep those linebackers clean first and foremost, so a little early for me, but I wasn't shocked. Then Radledge out of Georgia, the first pretty definitive overpay by the Lions, not for the player specifically, but moving down 100 spots from 130 to 230, just to jump off free selections at around 2. But I'm not going to deny that this isn't the most Lions player ever when you look at this 6'6", 315-pound guard with his mullet kicking everyone's ass. Has that broad upper body and plenty of force at impact to cover bodies in the run game, get the ball rolling in combos and jack up linebackers, even on shorter runways. Becomes a bowling ball on his longer poles across the formation and in the screen game, taking up moving targets quite regularly. You see him get a tight grip and really dig those tree trunks into the turf to anchor against power rush attempts, just putting people in the cage, and does so without drawing flags typically. Certainly not the most graceful move overall, and more of a brawl in the run game than somebody who perfectly latches and sustains all the time. and he might have his struggles mirroring twitchy interior rushers who can really threaten his edges, particularly with those shorter arms. But I was a huge fan of Ratledge, and again, he's a perfect fit for Detroit. They were able to select Christian Mahogany late last year because of a medical red flag. Well, it's not a definitive because he's had a year to acclimate to the NFL competition, but I think the rookie plugs in the left guard in place of veteran Kevin Zeitler right away. Unless Mahogany beats out veteran Green Glasgow, and now Ratledge can stay on his more natural right side. With Frank Ragnar sandwiched between those two, they would really get after some people, moving the line of scrimmage, maybe with more of a downhill mentality on the ground, and the new offensive coordinator John Morton, coming over from Denver as the former passing game coordinator. Then the Arkansas wide receiver Tesla, I mentioned the cost of the previous trade up, but this was the biggest we don't fucking care move of the entire draft, as Detroit sent 2 2026 third rounders to Jacksonville for a 6 this and next year to jump up 32 slots from the end of day 2. And I think there's some stuff to get pretty excited about with Tesla, but I just can't get on board with this, even if they simply don't pick 70 made that selection would have been early. But let's give him his due here. Height, weight, speed standout at 6'4", 215 pounds, running a 4.43, going basically 40 inches on the vertical jump, and the fastest short shuttle time of all wide receivers at the past combine. Consistently extends off his frame for the ball, you see the ability to crank his neck for difficult catches, and climb the ladder with an expanded catch radius. And I think they like him a lot as a blocker with his size, strong hands, ability to come to balance, and battle bigger bodies in the box. But he needs some room to build up to the top gear, and is underdeveloped with his hand swipes to clear the release off the line, which is why he only found success when deployed as a power slot. And he doesn't have much from making miss ability after the catch, or general abruptness to his game. The physical upside is clearly there, and with this kind of draft capital invested, they'll find ways to get him onto the field, but Amon-Ra St. Brown is pretty much locked into the slot, and now you can't put the slot into spots that he's clearly most comfortable with right now, unless you move from Sam Laporte a little more outside in 11 personnel sets. Generally, Tim Patrick may be the sacrificial X receiver on base downs, but maybe the tight end is more so your isolated receivers on the backside on longer downs, and generally you're probably going to see a lot of condensed sets where his designations aren't as meaningful. With that, there's about a 100 pick gap until Detroit got back onto the boards with Miles Frazier, who they actually slightly moved up for as well. Thickly built guard with borderline tackle length, and can jump out there in a pinch as he showed during Senior Bowl week. Brings his pads with plenty of pop to create initial movement and drive bodies on the interior against the will. Takes excellent angles up to the second level and latches his hands with appropriate placement, rarely resorting to holds. And he's patient with mirroring lateral movements when opponents have a 2-way go against him in pass pro, where even if he loses the first meaningful contact against his man, Frazier's feet pop back, and his core is so strong that he's able to stall their force. But he only has 9-inch hands, which don't always grant him firm control of defenders in tight quarters, and generally plays rather tall, where it leads to him getting pretty straight-legged later on the run snaps, and his hands being more susceptible to being swiped aside as they arrive high in pass pro. Someone who really left an impression on me watching the week down in Mobile, showing his flexibility to move along front and get the job done. Here late in the 6th to potentially get a premier 6th or even 7th man on the line, with Frazier's starting experience and track record in the SEC is a great value. He was right on the fringe from a personal top 100, still unsure if there was anything in his player file that gave people pause, but that may be my favorite pick to try made otherwise. Then Ahmed Hassanein, the Boise State edge, the first Egyptian player to be drafted in the NFL, compact, strong frame at 6 to 270 pounds, with a hardened mentality as a power edge. For our Triangle week, I thought this guy's get off to win the gap and run defense, and not give blockers any surface area to establish control as on display from the start. Accelerates into and stunts pulling guards on kickouts, and a forceful tackler even after creating trash in the backfield. He does very well to adjust his track to the depth of the quarterback's drop, and has the ankle flexion to corner's rush, often paired with a tight club swing combo. But Hassanein tends to drop his eyes into contact in the run game and lose track of the ball occasionally, and too often comes in hard as a tackler, while it lacks some quick twitch and sudden acceleration to really threaten the edges of the frame of pass protectors, ending up in too many chest-on-chest reps. Another guy who really fits in the line's mantra is this relentless worker who refuses to stay blocked, but may not give you a ton to get excited about. I think Dan Campbell and company saw a younger version of John Cominsky in him, and if Hassanein eventually is that guy for them, that would be a great selection, probably having to earn his way into the late portion of the rotation. Dirty Dan Jackson next, the Georgia safety, as this uber-aggressive, borderline relentless former Bulldog. This guy only knows going forwards, where he charges up the alley and run defense, and is looking to lay wood, fearless and finds lanes between friend and foe to the ball. He understands where the weak spots are in the coverage and addresses those in case the quarterback wants to get the ball out quickly on leverage or spot throws, and he's looking to decapitate guys trying to catch the ball in his vicinity. Only has a very limited sample size in true man coverage, but an excellent showing during Senior Bowl week, being physical, anticipating routes, and competing at the catch point against tight ends. He'll have to improve his eye balance, targeting from the quarterback over to ancillary targets, and not end up with so many overzealous angles. And he allows himself to get outflanked too much, simply need to do a better job of coming to balance and tightly wrapping his arms around the receivers after driving up completions in front of him, with nearly a 20% missed tackle rate in his 1 year as a starter. So this is another great team player mindset fit, and Detroit really had nobody behind Brian Branch and Kirby Joseph. Although I think they might want to add one more safety, so Jackson can more heavily focus on special teams as a rookie, as he's cleaning some of that stuff up. And finally, Dominic Lovett, the Georgia receiver, has the 4-4 speed to threaten defenses on seams and benders, smooth route runner with efficient transitions, who is very adept at eluding defenders, finished his career with less than a 5% drop rate, and he's super slippery with the ball in his hands, but a pure slot receiver without the play strength to deal with press to much of any capacity, and he allows defenders to just burrow their hands into his chest and bump him backwards, denying him any chance to get them blocked. So maybe some packages that use vertical speed and the axials laid on down the line for Lovett, but I don't see much of a path for him to getting onto the field early, because he's another slot who doesn't really give you anything as a blocker. Overall, if you show me the names here, other than the very last one, and to some degree Tesla is more of an upside projection, I'd say this makes a ton of sense for who the Lions want to be. Talib and Radledge at the top as reinforcements in the trenches on both sides of the ball is just perfect. Frazier, Hassanine and Jackson, all hard workers with alignment versatility who provide much needed depth, that's cool. What I just cannot agree with is how they manage the board. We've kind of let them off the hook based on deserving the benefit of the doubt due to their recent success, especially when they drafted a running back and linebacker in the first round a couple of years ago. Essentially they moved like 100 spots on day 3 for 3 spots up to get Radledge in a second, and they almost invested 3 third-round picks in Tesla, as someone whose production simply doesn't justify that, when I don't think the testing quite lives up to the hype when I watch this tape. I like the idea of restocking with guys in the image, and if they don't tap into Nexus draft capital with those couple of third-rounders, I have a much easier time getting on board with this, but I just can't sit here and act like they made smart decisions in terms of those resources, even if they should remain among the favorites for the NFC. Team number 3 trying to join the pool again, the Green Bay Packers, who in the first round 23rd overall selected Matthew Golden, the wide receiver out of Texas, second round 54th overall Anthony Belton, offensive tackle NC State, third round 87th overall Savion Williams, wide receiver TCU, fourth round 124th overall Baron Sorrell, edge defender out of Texas, fifth round 159th overall Colin Oliver, edge defender / linebacker Oklahoma State, sixth round 198th overall Warren Brinson, interior defensive lineman Georgia, and then 2 7th rounders, 237th overall Micah Robinson, cornerback Tulane, and 250th overall John Williams, offensive tackle Cincinnati. The first wide receiver the Packers have selected in round 1 in 22 years, which I'm sure Aaron Rodgers is keenly aware of. And they do it at Lambeau Field, a great moment. As for Golden, very talented guy, even though personally was a lot lower on him than most people. Shows great skills and patience as a route runner, being able to set up defenders one-on-one with how he chooses his stems and his body language. Is able to fully extend and pull in challenging catches into his body, with good timing for when to elevate, while showing the toughness and focus to attack the team for the defense. And he brings the field vision of a return specialist, understanding angles of defenders in space, being able to cross guys up, and often pulls himself forward late to finish runs. Golden requires some exit steps when trying to snap with routes back towards his quarterback after pushing out up the field, and all his patience can border on being a tad late at times. There are some moments when his hands aren't aligned optimally, and I don't think he plays up to that 4.29 speed that he clocked in at the combine, since I actually thought he lacked that extra gear to attach vertically or pull away from pursuit at times. This was my wide receiver 6, and I had a firm second round grade on him because of those factors, but I do understand the intrigue, and this is about where I expected Golden to hear his name called, even though there were plenty of times in the past where I thought the Packers could or should have addressed the position but didn't. This is a great landing spot for the player himself, because you have the steady Romeo Doubs who can line up at the X and win for contact, Jaden Reed is a gadget and slot guy, Golden now probably off the ball for the most part, maybe not a big time volume option right away, but to create plenty of air underneath in the coverage and give him room to operate. Next up, Anthony Belton, hefty left tackle at 6'6", 335 pounds, with massive quads, who was a very fitting replacement at NC State there for former Panthers top 10 pick A.K. Kwano. Offers a strong inside hand to create that movement on the front side of zone concepts and right edge defenders towards the sideline. Even when his hands don't line perfectly and he isn't able to create that initial momentum, Belton can regularly move those guys on the second level against their will anyway. He shows good rhythm to his kick slide with appropriate awareness for the depth of the pocket, keeping a tight punch, and capable of slowing down power rushers by extending through his hips and grabbing a lot of turf with those massive cleats. He has a tendency of getting a little top heavy as a run blocker, and savvy defensive players able to pull him forward, where he largely gets the job done thanks to raw force rather than actual technique. and his hands tend to get really wide in pass pro, where he grants rushers access to his chest, ending up hugging him instead, which led to plenty of flags. If you can stop the bull rush at tackle, that makes everything a lot easier for you. Belton has enough lateral mobility to protect his edges, but I do think he's a ways to go technically to be as efficient as he can be in both phases of the game. Depending on what the plans are with last year's first rounder Jordan Morgan, and if he starts over Sean Ryan at guard, Belton may be your primary backup, where he could have some early struggles, but could be the eventual blindside solution when Rasheed Walker's rookie contract runs out next offseason. Then Savion Williams from TCU, kind of a unique skill position talent at this draft, with 6'4", 225 pounds, would line up at the X, but also handle end arounds, be a wildcat quarterback and more. Offers that elite size speed profile with the extra gear to pull away from corners and straight go routes, aggressively works back to the football when required, and has those go-go gadget arms to extend in crowded windows, where it initially looks like it might be anyone's ball in contested situation, but he pulls them in at an insane 75% rate. Plus, after the catch, he almost squares up defenders trying to create those one-on-one tackling drills, which he wins more often than not, whether it's crossing them up or lowering his pads and churning additional yardage. He doesn't turn up breakoff routes with a lot of precision, where it feels like he's counting steps. It is also inefficient with his footwork, has some passes go off his hands where he seemingly doesn't slow down the pace of the ball enough as he touches it, or he just leaves his feet unnecessarily. And for as big and strong as Williams is, he's a subpar blocker currently, who doesn't limit the space to defenders and therefore overextends regularly. So this was a tough eval because what really is Williams? I think the skills to be a full-time receiver eventually are there, but if he's your designed touch option, how does that affect Jaden Reed? What we do know is that he's incredibly talented, and Battlefield probably had a vision for all the fun ways to take advantage of him when handpicking the guy, so let's see. Now on to day 3, what I want to do here is quickly run through these next 3 names and then kind of lump them together. First with Baron Sorrell from Texas, kind of a tween at 6'3", 225 pounds, but played a lot of 4 iron 5 technique, dealing with plenty of traffic, able to bend backwards tight ends and even some tackles in the run game, plays extremely hard at all times, being relentless in his pursuit of the ball, packs easy lateral mobility to execute gap exchanges and stunts, and has some real shake to him as a pass rusher, keeping opponents off balance with deceptive shoulder fakes and step sequencing. He could definitely click a little earlier to counter the first steps of run blocking schemes, while we'd like to see a little more authority in how he stacks and sheds offensive linemen, and too often he allowed tackles to stun him when they landed one-handed strikes into his frame, and with arms of just over 32 inches, usually guys literally outreach him at times in passing situations. Colin Oliver from Oklahoma State, on the very small end for someone playing on the edge at 6'2", 240 pounds, barely gets up to 31 inches in terms of arm length, and may not be able to add a whole lot of mass to his frame, and he missed a massive rate of tackles, as he simply has minimal range, and you see guys slip out of his grasp frequently, but he definitely looked more suited for a role on the edge in 2024, and charges into offensive linemen with reckless abandon in run game, has the Tasmanian Devil mindset, where he pursues the ball as if his life depended on it, and he features impressive initial burst and ability to bend the edge to really limit the surface area for tackles at his height, with the suddenness to create favorable angles for himself. While Warren Brinson from Georgia has that sturdy, powerful frame on the interior at 310 pounds paired with 33.5 inch arms, regular is first off the ball and gets his hands into the chest of blockers before they're even fully out of the stance yet, being able to play gap control, deal with double teams, but also knife through creases between blockers if asked to attack. And he's capable of working the depth of the pocket and claw potential escape lanes for the passer, but I thought his quick and reactionary skills to punish guards who overcommit a certain way really stood out. Too often he'd stumble or end up on the ground, either getting tripped up or just not having the ankle flexion to stay upright on challenging angles, and he can push the pocket to a certain degree, but you don't really see him drive interior pass protectors backwards with the bull rush. So as we throw these 3 together, I think it's an interesting combination of skill sets, and the way I view this is the Packers clearly like the guys that were available at this point, and I think they were smart with anticipating this deep D-line class, benefiting them here on day 3, as they were able to add depth on the front. Always interesting, because he may be used more as an off-ball pressure player, since he's not a typical 4-3 D end on base downs, but Brinson I absolutely love, as someone who will play 300 snaps as a 6th round rookie, and Sorrell is great if they want to up the rate of games they run on longer downs, since they weren't able to consistently get home in 4 last season, and that's key to really making Jeff Hafley's defense work. I think all 3 guys at least came at appropriate value, and if they figure out how to divvy up playing time, should benefit them here pretty much right away. Micah Robinson, the corner, I'll be honest, I didn't specifically evaluate. I watched a couple of guys in the 2-lane secondary with Caleb Branshaw and Jonathan Edwards. Robinson did not catch my eye when doing so. 5'11", 185 pounds, 4'2" speed as measured by his pro day, transferred there from Furman this past season, where he snatched up a couple of interceptions, 1 return to the house, and 6 PBUs, while only allowing 1 touchdown and a little over 5 yards per target. A core special teamer at his previous stop, so that's probably how he has to earn a spot on this roster, even though those numbers, just looking at them here, are impressive. And finally, John Williams from Cincinnati, I'm a big fan of as a developmental tackle prospect, 6'4", 325 pounds, with 34-inch arms and 11-inch hands, sudden out of his stance and capable of getting to the playside role of edge defenders and reach blocks, or execute backs at cutoffs, jumps out into his diagonal pass sets, and is patient with blindly throwing his punch, but then being able to guide speed rushers past the apex. Plus he brings lateral agility to mirror inside counters, even if his movements aren't perfectly efficient, and he had a tremendous week of practice at the Shrine Bowl. Doesn't bring a whole lot of jolts when he connects his hands in the run game, and I wouldn't classify him as a gap scheme mauler by any means, and he operates with a massive gap between his front and back foot as he gains depth on deeper dropbacks, which limits his ability to brace for power on first impact. So there are clearly things to clean up, but I think if he's somehow sneaking through waivers and can bring him along slowly in a practice squad, this kid can be in the league for a while. So all in all, I thought there was a lot to like about what Green Bay did on Saturday, re-establishing depth on the defensive line and throwing a couple of darts at talented dudes who played their best when last seen at the very end. These 1 and 2 I was less of a fan of. Golden Williams I was generally a little lower on, although I trust LaFleur to get plenty out of them. If nothing else, as I said in my big draft recap, this kind of makes Christian Watson redundant as part of that receiving corp, because collectively those two bring a lot of his qualities to the table and are ready to go without extensive injury histories like Watson here early on in the NFL. I just can't give them blind credit for what those guys could end up doing, but at least they stuck to their original picks rather than moving up for either one of them. Belton is another guy I thought was about around early, but I do understand that more so with the perceived gap between him and the rest of the tackle class, even though I thought personally there was one more name to throw in here. So it made sense for me in the moment, and even though they went receiver early, it's very much a Brian Gutekunst class overall, with a little more potential for excitement sprinkled in. Closing out now with the Minnesota Vikings, clearly the smallest class of this NFC North foursome, with only 5 selections. First round 24th overall Donovan Jackson, interior offensive lineman Ohio State. Third round 102nd overall Ty Felton, wide receiver Maryland. 5th round 149th overall Tyrion Ingram Dawkins, the edge/interior lineman out of Georgia. And then back-to-back picks in the 6th round, 201st and 22nd overall, Kobe King, linebacker Penn State, and Garen Bartholomew, tight end out of Pittsburgh. Donovan Jackson is a guy with prototype measurements at 6'4", 315 pounds, with a wide chest, thick lower half, and good ankle flexion to be low in his stance. Highly efficient at getting to his landmarks, and taking away the path for defense and zone concepts, being able to fit his hands, attach to combo blocks, and peel off for linebackers with appropriate timing. Operates with great sync in his lower body to move efficiently and create a roadblock for anybody trying to go through him in the pass game. Smoothly passes off twists and picks up the late rushers, while having kicked out to left tackle once Josh Simmons got hurt last year for them, at the very least showing the ability to deal with aggressive outfield rushers and ride them past the quarterback. Now, Jackson gets caught leaning too much and at times ducking his head in the run game, allowing opportunity to be backdoored, and he's pretty duck-footed in pass protection, which limits his change of direction ability to recover if caught leaning excessively one way, which is why he had some early struggles in true pass sets. I've had my eye on Jackson for a long time as a 3-year starter for the Buckeyes. I thought it was about 50-50 on if he'd go in the first round, and I like his fit in Minnesota quite a bit. Having brought over the former Colts duo of Ryan Kelly and Will Fries, this interior three has been completely overhauled, and we should finally be able to see them have a run game under Kevin O'Connell, where they actually move people off the ball. The only thing I didn't love is that the 2 picks right behind them came with teams moving back up into the first round, and reportedly the Vikes had opportunities to trade back and acquire additional picks since they already came in with limited capital. So they didn't get back onto the clock until the final selection of day 2 with Ty Felton, who was a solidly built receiver out of Maryland at 6'2", 185 pounds, really bolstered his numbers last year with over 1,100 yards and 9 touchdowns. He shows the speed to blow by safeties on high 7 and slot fade routes, which he ran a 4.37 at the combine, but also quickly punished soft zone defenses when they give him space on slants and crossers, gets his eyes back as he enters soft spots, and doesn't lose focus as the ball is arriving there into closing windows and the chance of getting hit simultaneously with it. And then with the ball in his hands, the awareness for defenders closing in on him that Wrigley has as guys trying to square him up, and how well he uses his off arm to push off, swipe down, and regain his balance made him a big yards after catch threat. I don't think he has the instant acceleration to put DBs on their heels, and he can get a little choppy with his steps when the spacing is slightly off. Plus he routinely allows the ball to get into his frame and center catches, and you like to see him finish strong in contested situations, particularly down the field. So he's your typical number 3 who can hurt defenses if they don't take away room for him, which is perfect in Minnesota because you already have Justin Jefferson and Jordan Addison in place. KOC likes his 12 personnel sets, but we saw him get some more free wide receiver groupings when they weren't able to run the ball effectively against even box counts. I think the idea here is to spread the field for really a rookie quarterback in JJ McCarthy, where Falcon can be an extension of the run game on sweeps and screens, but now you have the interior O-line to take advantage of the softer fronts they're facing. Tyrion Ingram Dawkins out of Georgia is 6'5", 280 pounds. He absolutely crushed it at the 2025 NFL Combine, posting the top marks in every single testing measure for the interior D-line that he participated in other than the 40, where he was tied for second. Projects very well as a base stand in the 3-4 front, who can move in and out depending on offensive formation, thanks to incredible athleticism and plus length. Can lock out with one arm, widen his space and set a firm edge, or squeeze past blockers and create traffic when lined up on the interior. And he features an explosive first step as a pass rusher, along with a fluid high swim move and great bend at that height, along with the lateral agility to work all around the front with various twists and games. He does lose track of the football at times as he lowers his head into contact, and too often gets caught battling his man in front of him instead of trying to diagnose and locate angles to the ball. And his approach as a pass rusher and hand usage underdeveloped at this point, particularly when it comes to secondary combats if stunned by the punch initially. I thought this guy had a chance to sneak into the back end of day 2 just because NFL evaluators love this kind of talent in that body type. Maybe they didn't know exactly where to deploy him, but you can make him an oversized the end in the nickel package and then just go crazy in dropback settings as he continues to develop as just a 1-year starter who, after the investment you made up front, doesn't have to play a whole lot early on. And then the 2 guys in the 6th round, Kobe King, the Penn State linebacker, carries nearly 240 pounds very well, with nice muscle distribution, but also is a pretty smooth lateral mover against zone schemes. When he takes some blocks straight up, he engages low with the play strength to stand his ground. Plus, he's an active communicator in zone coverage, and he can go for running backs as a blitzer when they're locked in protection. Too often King found himself on the wrong side of blocks against counteraction, or he kinda just gambles on plays, and he'll allow run fakes to pull him off his landmarks or miss someone sneaking across his face for big yardage, as he overall allowed 11.6 yards per target as the next closest defender in coverage last season, according to PFF. Someone where the profile and surface as you look at him promises a lot more than he currently gives you, unfortunately, but maybe defensive coordinator Brian Flores can get it out of him, and in particular weaponize him as a blitzer early in his career, along with working on teams. And the last guy we'll talk about here today, Gavin Bartholomew out of Pittsburgh, another guy who's really solidly built at 6'5", 250 pounds. The tight end consistently brings his hips for contact in the run game and has a finishing mindset. I thought he was well coordinated as a route runner, with the play strength to work for contact and maintain his focus on getting to the spot that is required to reach. And he has 10-inch hands, plus the strength to absorb contact at the catch point, as well as to churn through would-be tacklers. He could do a better job of identifying and selling on soft spots against zone coverage, and he only has 32-inch arms, which lets him lunging into contact as a blocker, as well as struggling to secure targets outside his frame at times. Most likely sat behind TJ Hawkinson and Josh Oliver with how much they like him as a blocker, while he'll be in competition with a couple of UDFAs for the tight end 3 spot. To put a cap on his Vikings draft class, all the players they brought in made a lot of sense. They already invested heavily into the trenches on both sides of the ball, and put the finishing touches on that with Jackson the first, and even Ingram Dawkins as someone who hit the rotation on defense late on the line. Felton's an optimal wide receiver 3 for them, who adds some run after catch skills. Between King and Bartholomew late, I prefer what they can get out of the latter as a tight end who can make something out of the opportunities, leaking into the flats or throwing the ball up to him in the red zone. Again, what I simply don't love was them not taking advantage of opportunities to get back some pretty good draft capital, especially if you look at the 2 trades right behind them in the first round, and even to some degree later on, as they were working with diminished resources. But it's not like that roster was really missing a whole lot. They were 1 win away from the damn 1 seed in the NFC. The big question of course now is if JJ McCarthy can take over the ship and have similar success early on, or how much of a step to take back in the immediate before they hope they can get over the top eventually. That brings us to a wrap up of the NFC North, and I'll try to be fairly quick here since I thought we went pretty far into detail with this video, as I ranked the 4 draft classes and approaches against each other. Not the strongest division I would get to discuss, to be honest, which is more about resource management than individual players. I'll actually put the Bears in number 1, but without a whole lot of conviction. Loveland and Burden as your first 2 selections to really add some firepower around Caleb I'll love, and I think they've now built an infrastructure with Ben Johnson that he can really thrive in. Shamar Turner at the end of round 2 was definitely early for me, and Ruben Hippolyte is a name that'll haunt me, as he was completely off my radar as a primary special teamer at the bottom of the 4th. I like what they did late with the hypes at corner and South Frazier, depth on the O-line and at running back, but certainly wouldn't be number one in most divisions. Vikings are second for me, for all the guys he brought in made a lot of sense, with Donovan Jackson's the final piece on the O-line, Ty Felton is an awesome number 3 receiver to complement what they already had in place, the super talented lineman out of Georgia, who could eventually turn into an impact starter for them if given time with the other investments they have already made to the front. Just really want them to acquire some resources along the way. Packers I'll put at number 3, since each of the first 3 picks were about a run early for me, but I will trust Matt LaFleur to some degree on using the skill position guys to put in roles where they'll be productive for them. And then I thought they knocked it out of the park on day 3, correctly identifying and taking advantage of the depth of the Steve line class. The final pick in John Williams as a big time trades tackle prospect. So what you do with the premium resources is big, but I do also want to acknowledge that they truly only reached on those names based on my personal evaluations. And I have to put the Lions at the bottom, not because I don't like the names they drafted. In fact, as I said earlier, this looks so much like a Brad Holmes haul for Detroit, with ass kickers on both sides of the ball early, more depth at the spots later on. Dan Jackson's your annual day 3 maniac safety it seems. The trades they made in the second and third round to me are just indefensible, as much as you like the players, based on the value you gave up, including tapping heavily into next year's draft capital. I had to knock them down for it, but hey, if those guys end up hitting, they'll again have the last laugh. But that wraps up the first episode of this year's Divisional Draft and Roster Review series. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like and consider subscribing for more of these and to follow along for the other 28 teams. What do you think of the NFC North overall and what they did in the draft, the offseason generally, and maybe an outlook for 2025? Happy to discuss any of those topics in the comment section. I have more detailed scouting reports on like 130 draft prospects and a lot more over on my site hellotofootballtalk.com. Link to that and my social media channels are down below in the video description. Let's have some fun this offseason. I'll be back with the AFC North in a couple of days. So until then, see you later. Peace!